Hello and welcome to News Central Television. I am Likon Onobanjo. Here are the stories making headlines beyond the continent. We begin the news in Europe, where strong winds and heavy rain from Storm Isha have brought travel disruption and left tens of thousands of homes without electricity in the UK. Parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England and Scotland have seen the strongest winds in 10 to 20 years. Gusts of wind of nearly 100 miles per hour were recorded in parts of the north of England. About 45,000 people in Northern Ireland were without power overnight, as well as 8,000 in northwest England and 3,000 in Wales. The Sellafield nuclear site suspended operations, whilst train services were cancelled and flights up and down the country are experiencing severe disruption. Let's now talk to our international correspondent, Afua Hagan, for more on this. Afua, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Thank you.
So we are seeing disruptions, blackouts, and people having to deal with the issue of floods and storms around their area. How badly hit are livelihoods? How is that impacting businesses across UK at this time?
Well, you have about 300,000 homes and businesses who at the moment are without power. You had some really hairy landings yesterday with different flights being redirected. Flights that were supposed to land in London, perhaps landing in Glasgow and Edinburgh, Bristol or even Paris. So huge disruption up and down the country. Train services having a lot of disruption as well. Train services in Scotland cancelled completely, and up and down the country you have trees falling on lines, 2 people killed in their cars by falling trees as well. So at the moment, this Storm Isha, which was the tail end of an ice storm that hit the US, we got the tail end of that and it swelled again over the Atlantic. That has more or less died down, but the problem is we are now in for our 10th named storm of the season. We have Storm Jocelyn coming, which is due to make landfall tomorrow, which could bring heavy rain and more wind. So you have businesses and homes that perhaps haven't been able to recover from this storm, that might have tiles missing, that might have windows broken, and tomorrow we're going to have a heavy rain and floods. And people will still be without electricity because the electricity board hasn't managed to fix all the homes and businesses and get them reconnected. So it's really a race against time for people to try and make themselves more comfortable before the next storm arrives tomorrow.
Well, it's quite interesting that you say that Storm Jocelyn would also be coming anytime soon. And just to say, there is the Storm Agnes, Storm Babette, Ciara and Debbie, Storm Ellen, Storm Fergus, Gerrit, Hank, and now Isha. And of course, the 10th, which is Jocelyn, is just to come. And that boils down to the question, why are there so many storms this year? And does it have to do with the climate change?
Well, that's a real topic of discussion. Look, we do have storms every single year in the UK during the winter and autumn season. This year, perhaps it feels that it's been worse than any other, but the reality is that as the earth continues to warm, if you have the earth warming by 1 degree, say, you have 7% more precipitation in clouds, which means that you will have heavier rainfall and more freak weather events, more droughts, more heat domes and more storms. So as global warming continues, you will have more of these freak weather events, which means that you will have more of these storms. So it's pertinent, actually, and becomes more pertinent with each year, that we must pay attention to what nature is telling us and actually do what we can to try and negate, first of all, global warming. So try and stick to net zero, try and not let the earth warm by 1.5 degrees. But we also have to work on our preparedness. So that is about storm defenses, that's about flood defenses, that's about preparing for droughts and heat domes. All these things have to be considered as we are also trying to work towards net zero and prevent the earth from warming by 1.5 degrees.
So what has been the efforts of government in helping to mitigate the impact on people whose lives and businesses have been adversely affected, and what more needs to be done to help them get by?
Well, we have the Environment Agency here in the UK, which have really been or trying to be out in force to deal with these issues. We just had Storm Henk before Storm Isha, and that brought a lot of flooding. And there was a lot of criticism actually on the Environment Agency, first of all, for not warning people ahead of time that floods were coming. And second of all, when the floods happened, the cleanup didn't happen quick enough. So we do have the Environment Agency here in the UK, but there are calls, like I said, for them to work more on preparedness. So warning people when storms are coming. That's why we name storms actually, so that people can be warned about them. We can talk about it on social media and in the media. If a storm has a name, that means that it has different level warnings with it, yellow, amber, and red warnings, which tell us about the warnings of threat to life, threat to businesses, whether you should travel or not. So we do have these things in place. But we also have a Conservative government that has rolled back quite heavily on green agendas, on meeting net zero, on meeting sustainable development goals. At the same time, we have the increase in these events in our weather, the Environment Agency increasingly under pressure. So like I say, it would be pertinent for the government, first of all, to be investing in things that will make sure that we stop warming the earth and we can prevent these freak weather events. But until we get there, we need to have more preparedness in place. The Environment Agency need to do more to warn people, to have flood defences in place, to storm-proof houses, whether that's retrofitting. But also on the flip side, when it comes to summer, a couple of years ago, we had 40 degrees here in the UK. In London, that's very, very unusual. We need to retrofit homes and houses and businesses, towns and road planning so that we can withstand these type of temperatures. So there's a lot to be done, certainly.
Finally, before I let you go, we understand that these storms boils down to jet streams that we are experiencing all over UK at this time, which is unsettling localities and communities. But then in terms of preparedness on the part of the people who are directly involved, what would you advise? You've talked about the need for the people living in these areas to also put up defense mechanisms, but then wouldn't you also advocate probably evacuation from those areas that are affected at this particular time to move to safer areas pending the time the storm weathers down?
Absolutely. That's why we have our warning systems in place. So we have yellow, amber, and red warnings. The red warning is the most severe warning. That's a warning of danger to life. So that's not to travel. That is to shelter in place, as it were. For the moment, from 6 o'clock tomorrow, we have amber warnings up and down the country for rain and for high winds. And when that happens, that is, of course, staying at home, not going out, and not traveling. There will be disruptions to travel. When it comes to things like evacuation, that is when you have flood warnings in place. We don't have those in place yet. That could happen tomorrow when we have the warnings updated, when we know more about Storm Jocelyn, what parts of the country it's going to hit. But yes, it's all about relying on the weather warnings that we get from the Met Office and also from the Environment Agency for people to really take heed to those warnings, whether it's to get to higher ground, whether it's to use sandbags if you're in coastal areas, and whether that's to stay at home, not to travel, and shelter in place. It's all about being across the Met Office's warnings, whether it's yellow, amber, or red, and take the most appropriate action.
Afua Hagan, thank you so much for helping us understand this issue and hope that it stems. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're still in Europe. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has called the conflict in Ukraine a battle between good and evil and vowed more support for Ukraine on his first visit to the war-torn country since returning to power. Tusk's comments come during a visit to Kiev on Monday, his first trip to the war-torn country since returning to power. The surprise trip came as the Kremlin blamed Ukraine for a weekend attack on the Baltic gas terminal, the latest in a series of apparent Ukrainian airstrikes on Russian energy infrastructure. Tusk is among a flurry of European leaders who have visited Kiev in recent weeks to reassure Ukraine of international support as its biggest political and military backers struggle to secure aid.
Najgorętszy front to jest ten najbardziej tragiczny fragment konfrontacji dobra ze złem. Ja się nie Wstydzę używać tych wielkich słów.
In France, with 3 of the 6 defendants still at large and on the run, the trial of the 2017 cash convoy robbery in Switzerland that resulted in a record 40 million Swiss francs was held in Lyon on Monday morning. Defense attorney Cedric Trabal laments the absence of the people who blamed this robbery from scratch and says they will try to establish the facts without them. The 6 defendants, aged between 39 and 54, and mostly from the Lyon region, were arrested in a villa a few hours after the nighttime attack on a cash-in-transit van belonging to the Loomis company between Geneva and Lausanne on May 24, 2017, and were arrested in possession of various currencies crammed into bags, 4 gold bars, and several thousands of precious stones with a total estimated value of more than 42.3 million euros.
Ouais, effectivement, il manque plus 3 personnes importantes manquent à ce procès. On va essayer de retracer les faits sans eux. Moi, plus particulièrement ce qui me concerne, l'enjeu pour mon client va être d'être condamné à la juste hauteur de ce qu'il a fait, c'est-à-dire ce que j'expliquerai pas grand-chose par rapport aux autres. Enfin, je m'entends. Il était présent sur les faits, mais il n'est en aucun cas un instigateur et une pièce importante de ce braquage. Les 3 absents, vous l'avez vu ce matin, ce sont quand même ceux qui ont les casiers les plus importants et ce sont ceux qui ont préparé, on peut le dire, qui ont préparé de toutes pièces ce braquage. J'avais des questions à leur poser, donc moi dans ma défense, oui, ça va me porter préjudice. J'aurais aimé demander certaines précisions à certaines personnes qui ne sont pas là, donc moi, à titre personnel, pour ma défense, ça me porte préjudice. Je n'aurais pas certaines précisions que j'aurais aimé avoir. Avec vous, c'est vrai que ça va être même fastidieux parce qu'on va retracer les faits qu'à travers leurs déclarations, qu'à travers l'enquête qui va être déroulée demain matin par le directeur d'enquête. Mais c'est vrai que sans leur poser des questions, sans les faire intervenir, sans ponctuer tout ça d'intervention, ça va être plutôt indigeste.
Let's now head to the U.S., where former U.S. President Donald Trump has left the Trump Tower as he is expected to testify in a defamation case at the Manhattan Federal Courthouse in New York for harassing and defaming author Jean Carroll. Trump has already been found guilty and she wants damages of about $10 million. Donald Trump aims to seal up the Republican presidential nomination after the contest narrowed to a 2-horse race, with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' withdrawal less than 48 hours before the New Hampshire primary on Tuesday. The ex-president won a crushing victory over DeSantis in Iowa last week, with Haley trailing in 3rd, and no candidate has ever failed to claim the Republican crown after taking the 2 opening states. Still in the U.S., Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley met with voters at a restaurant in Epping, New Hampshire, ahead of Tuesday's first-in-the-nation primary election. Some residents who said they liked her as a candidate had second thoughts on her candidacy, as they believe she had backed Donald Trump if he was re-elected.
Difference between these choices that people are going to make on Tuesday. They can have more of the same, or they can have a new generational leader. And I want to stress the generational part. We've watched for a long time. A lot of these guys stay too long. We've seen the old guard continue to do the same things. We want to shift that. It's time that we go younger. It's time that we go with more solutions. It's time that we modernize in everything that we do. In Iowa, I wanted to be strong. We did that. We started at 2%, we ended at 20%. In New Hampshire, I want to be even stronger than that. And in South Carolina, I want to be even stronger than that. We'll find out what strong and stronger is on election day, but that's the goal. That's always been.
I am not a Trump person, definitely. I would love to see that he doesn't prosper as much as he had, like Iowa. He probably will, but I'm still hopeful that maybe people will come out and pick a different route, you know, pick a Democrat, I do like Haley, so, but I'm afraid she'd back him if he were elected, and I don't like that.
Just, you know, her ideas about how she's younger, which is a good thing, I think. And just, you know, in general, everything that she stands for, I tend to agree with. So
In Mexico, at least 12 suspected criminals have been killed on a highway near Hermosillo in the northern state of Sonora in what authorities called a failed attempt to rescue the son of a cartel hitman. In a statement, the spokesperson for Sonora's state attorney on Sunday said another 7 escaped and some were probably wounded. 2 security officials were hospitalized after the crossfire but are now in stable condition. The office said it suspected the group, armed with assault weapons, was attempting to rescue the son of Jesus Humberto Limon, a suspected hitman working for a faction of the Sinaloa cartel led by the sons of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. It stated, without providing more information, that Carlos Humberto, the son of the alleged hitman, had been arrested minutes earlier for crimes against health in Camino del Seri. And to South America, we told that Ecuadorian security forces have arrested 68 gang members after they stormed a hospital in the town of Yaguachi in Guayas province. Officials said the men had tried to take over the facility at which a member of their gang was receiving treatment. According to officials, the intruders' aim was to guard the patient from potential attacks from rivals. There have been previous incidents in which gang members have been targeted while in hospital. During the incident, nurses and hospital staff were taken hostage as the men exchanged fire with the police. It is not yet clear which gang was behind Sunday's storming of Yaguachi Hospital, nor who the injured man was they were trying to guard and has since died from gunshot wounds. We now go on a short break on Beyond the Continent. We'll be back with more. Many thanks for staying with us. Let's now tell you that the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates for Palestine, Riyad Al-Maliki, says he expects the EU to start contemplating sanctions against those who are really destroying the chances for a two-state solution or peace in the Middle East. Al-Maliki's remarks coincide with his meeting with EU officials in Brussels, where the foreign ministers of the bloc pressed Israel on Monday to eventually find a two-state solution following the Gaza conflict.
I expect from you to start contemplating sanctions against Netanyahu and others who are really destroying the chances for a two-state solution and for peace in the Middle East. I think, the collective responsibility of the European Union right now lies in this particular moment at a time when they have to show leadership and courage.
Meanwhile, the Israeli army have bombarded Khan Yunis, the latest epicenter of the war in Gaza, on Monday after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected what he said were Hamas conditions for the release of hostages, even amid mounting pressure from their families. Witnesses reported deadly strikes overnight in Khan Yunis, the largest city in southern Gaza, and fierce fighting between Israeli soldiers and Hamas militants. The health ministry in Hamas-run Gaza reported that more than 120 people had been killed in the previous 24 hours. 52-year-old Yunus Abdul Razak, who was sheltering with his family at the city's Al-Aqsa University, says artillery shelling has not stopped since 5 a.m. Meanwhile, 21-year-old Mahdi Antar says he feared forces would storm Al-Nasri Hospital, where he was sheltering with his family.
بلغ عدد الضحايا بين شهيد وجريح ومفقود وأسير حوالي 100,000 فلسطيني. 70% منهم من الأطفال والنساء وكبار السن. وتم نبش 18 مقبرة في قطاع غزة. حتى الأموات لم ينجوا من العدوان. إنه مهما كانت نتيجة المشاورات حول الموضوع فإنه لن يكون هناك أي حل على حساب التزامنا تجاه أهلنا في قطاع غزة.
And that's all at this hour. Do send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number and email on your screen. You can follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Likon Onobanjo.